Hello and welcome back to the TF1 show. It's been a couple of weeks since the last episode because, let's be honest, it was probably easier to find water in the Sahara Desert than find any worthwhile piece of Formula One content. But today we were given a massive, tasty treat of news when Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari announced that they were parting ways. Now, this is obviously a monumental announcement and it actually has many, many repercussions all over the grid. So we can safely say that the silly season has properly kicked off. So let's get into the discussion. Now, I guess we can maybe start with, let's go back to the origin story of the potential Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari falling out of love tale. And It's been coming a while, I think. I've been quite harsh with Vettel, especially over the last year, with all of the mistakes that he's been making in the Ferrari car. Obviously, 2018 was a golden opportunity for him to actually potentially win the World Championship, and he squandered a lot of those opportunities with the mistakes that he made. And then with Charles Leclerc coming into the team last year and doing so well, and beating Vettel basically, straight. There wasn't really any debate around whether which driver performed better in 2019. I think the alarm bells were ringing for Sebastian Vettel at the end of last year. However, with everything that happened this year, and with both Ferrari and Vettel confirming multiple times to the press that they are very much of the mind to continue with their arrangement for Vettel to stay on with Ferrari. Ferrari seemed keen to keep Vettel on as well. I think a lot of us were thrown off the scent in a way of thinking, given that the rules next year will remain the same as this year, given the stability everywhere else, we would expect most of the drivers for the teams to remain stable as well. But surprise, surprise, this morning we saw the rumors coming through, and then it was confirmed a couple of hours later that these two teams apparently weren't able to sort out or resolve their differences in the negotiations of Vettel's new contract. Now, that, I think, reveals a couple of things. I think, first and foremost, Ferrari probably wanted Vettel to perform as a de facto number two, maybe didn't want to give him any contractual privileges that he might have had in the past since Leclerc performed so well, and also since they've now signed this long-term deal with Charles Leclerc till 2024. And I can't imagine Vettel was very happy with the fact that he lost a lot of the power that he did have in the team, during previous years. And I think that could definitely be one aspect. I think another aspect was the fact that, or rumors at least, that Ferrari was only willing to offer Vettel a 1-year contract extension and not the 2 years that he was looking for. So that might have also, meant to Vettel that they are essentially just keeping him on until they can find someone else that they would rather prefer to support Charles Leclerc. Now, obviously from Vettel's perspective, you can understand why he wouldn't necessarily want to go for something like this, given everything that he's achieved and given all of the time and effort that he has put into building up the Ferrari team that they are today. But then on the other hand, from Ferrari's perspective, you can also understand where they're coming from, and with the way that they've been, structuring the setup in their team over the last year or so. Leclerc has the long-term contract. They've made their intent very clear with giving Leclerc that massively long extension. They are telling the world that he is going to be the guy that we're going to build our team around. And Vettel, unfortunately, isn't going to be part of that picture, especially since all of the controversial run-ins that they've had over the past year with Leclerc. It hasn't always been smooth sailing between the two of the drivers, and I guess Ferrari asked themselves the question, why would they have to pay Vettel a 4-time world champion salary, give him a contract with all of the perks that he's always enjoyed, and he essentially is going to be occasionally foiling their top driver or their preferred driver. And I think from Ferrari's perspective, that's why they probably offered Vettel what they did offer him. And I think between the two parties, that they then decided that actually seems like their goals aren't aligned anymore, and that it's probably best for them to part ways. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it was a surprise. From a timing perspective, I thought that they would keep Vettel on for another year. I thought Vettel would be happy to continue on. Apparently, we were all wrong. We were all fooled by Sebastian Vettel and by Ferrari. So, I guess it is what it is. So, we don't, at this moment, know where Vettel is going to go next year, if he's going to decide to stay on. And then also, very interestingly, we don't yet know who is going to be Vettel's replacement for the seat next year. Now, there are a couple of very interesting candidates. I'm going to go through a couple of them and maybe discuss potential pros and cons for each of these options, for Ferrari specifically. But I think it's widely publicized at the moment that the two front runners for the seat is Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo, with some rumors coming out of Ferrari, and I guess it's only rumors at this stage, that Carlos Sainz is probably going to be announced as the second Ferrari seat in the next 48 hours. Now, Carlos Sainz, and my love for Carlos Sainz has been very well publicized on this podcast. I think he's still an underrated performer. I think even in the press today, people are saying that, it's a no-brainer to put Daniel Ricciardo in the second seat over Carlos Sainz. And I actually don't think it is. I think Carlos Sainz might be the perfect complement, if you can call it that, to Charles Leclerc. I think he's an incredibly fast and accomplished race driver. He's a very, very strong executor of races. He doesn't really have any specific weaknesses. He's a steady, consistent performer. We saw how wonderfully he performed in that McLaren last year. So I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to drop points for Ferrari at any races. I think he's going to always maximize the points that he can potentially score. Whether he has the speed to match Leclerc, I actually don't know. I think it's difficult to say. Historic or just if you had to take a guess, I'd probably say no. Leclerc might be that 10th quicker over qualifying compared to Sainz. In terms of race execution, though, I think Sainz might make life for Leclerc quite difficult. However, I do think that's something that Ferrari needs in a sense as well. I think both Sainz and Leclerc are pretty non-confrontational. I don't think they are hot-headed in that sense. Leclerc might be slightly, but I think Sainz is a pretty steady driver. So and a very high quality, and a high quality driver that still can grow and develop into a team. I think he's still young enough. He's 25 as far as I'm aware. So I think he's young enough to ingrate himself in a team like that and actually help the team grow along with Charles Leclerc. So I can 100% understand why I think Carlos Sainz is probably the prime candidate. Now, the other, much spoken about candidate is Daniel Ricciardo, and obviously there's much going for him as well. He is a proven race winner. He has done, amazing things during his time in Red Bull. Still highly rated, very fast, amazing, overtaker, wheel-to-wheel battle. I think, though, that there are a couple of things that could potentially harm his case when compared to Sainz. I think firstly, he might come into the team with a bit more expectation around his position in the team relative to Leclerc. I think he'll be more difficult to control in terms of the way that he drives races. He's going to try and assert his dominance, I think, more than what Sainz would at this point in their respective careers, just because Ricciardo has been going at this for much longer, and he probably is going to see Ferrari as his final opportunity to win a world championship, which would obviously mean that he would have to assert himself in a team like that, which could potentially harm the harmonious relationship or situation that Ferrari wants to create within the team. And secondly, so obviously Daniel Ricciardo is a very funny guy. He has a great personality for the sport, very marketable. However, also a bit, cheeky, slightly does what he wants, says what he wants. Don't know necessarily if that's always the type of driver that Ferrari looks for, given how strict they are in terms of their marketing, in terms of their image, in terms of their brand. What they all of these things, their PR historically has been very, very tightly controlled. And I'm not sure whether Daniel Ricciardo really fits into that mold or into the Ferrari environment in totality. And I think that might be something that can hold him back when he's measured up against Carlos Sainz, where I think Carlos Sainz's personality might fit into the Ferrari setup a bit better, but I might also be wrong. And I think Ferrari can't really go wrong in choosing between the two drivers. I think they're going to get a quality driver, whether they go with Sainz or Ricciardo. So it's going to be fascinating to see which one they choose. Now, after those two are probably, I'd say, the most likely bets for the second seat, there are also a couple of legends or a couple of all-time greats that have been popping up in the rumors around the second Ferrari seat, with the first being Lewis Hamilton. Now, with Lewis, this started about, I think in Abu Dhabi last year, all of the rumors started flaring up about him meeting John Alcan and at Ferrari now. And they had a conversation, and that there's been secret talks for Lewis to jump ship to Ferrari for 2021. Now, Hamilton actually has been very vocal this year in saying that he actually doesn't really see himself doing that. He sees himself staying with the team that he's always been with, that's helped him to all of his successes. He wants to be a Mercedes legacy driver, and he's basically shuttered down a lot of the rumors around him going to Ferrari. Now, I guess we can then also say that Vettel and Ferrari made very similar noises this year about them wanting to continue their relationship, and look what happened. So I guess we can never say never with Lewis Hamilton. Maybe the allure of the red car is just too big for him to resist, which is fair enough. I do, however, think, again, putting Lewis Hamilton with Leclerc in the team, I mean, Hamilton is definitely, as a six-time world champion, not going to sit back and let Ferrari and Leclerc have it their own way. He's going to want to, take priority in everything that he does, and I guess as is his right, given everything that he's achieved. But I just think that logistically and in terms of the politics within the team, that move doesn't make sense to me from either a Hamilton perspective or a Ferrari perspective. So don't really see that happening. And, something else that I don't really see happening is Fernando Alonso making his triumphant return to Ferrari. So his name has popped up as well, although I think less than what we would have expected given all of the noise around him last year. I don't think Ferrari will have Alonso back after all of the pain that he's caused them in the past, and sort of the acrimony in which they parted ways the first time. I also think Alonso is old now. I think again he comes with a lot of baggage and a lot of potential trouble when it comes to him being put up against Leclerc, because obviously Alonso is the driver that he is. He is one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history, and putting him up against Leclerc can cause lots of difficulties for the team in terms of driver management. So again, for Ferrari and the way that they have put all of their chips on Leclerc, I don't see the point or the use in them going after a driver that like Fernando Alonso. That's probably going to derail their long-term plans in terms of how they want to develop the team. Now, the next driver is someone I saw the name come across one or two times today, and I think this is a very interesting proposition for Ferrari, and that is if Ferrari can poach Valtteri Bottas from Mercedes. And I think there's a couple of very good reasons as to why I think that'd be a great move for Ferrari. Firstly, we've seen how conflict averse and how much of a team player Bottas is at Mercedes, and how well he has supported, I guess, Lewis Hamilton in his championship campaigns. Now, obviously, Bottas wouldn't like him to be labelled as such, given that he has his own championship aspirations. But I think just his personality and how he goes about his business could mean that one of the big issues that Ferrari could potentially have in driver conflict, that I think that issue could be much, much smaller with someone like Valtteri Bottas. And secondly, obviously he has lots of information about the Mercedes team. He knows how that team works. He knows how that team is so successful. For them to have that information from a driver like Bottas could also prove to be invaluable to Ferrari. And lastly, I think Bottas, he's had lots of success at Mercedes, but I do think he also realizes that he has never been the priority in that team. He was initially put in as a replacement for Nico Rosberg when he retired unexpectedly, and he has done his job very well over the last couple of years. But he also knows that George Russell is waiting in the wings as the next Mercedes star to go into that team, and also then Esteban Ocon in a year's time, probably also going to be someone in the conversation, given that he's managed by Toto Wolff. So whether Bottas thinks he has the prospect of being a long-term achiever at Mercedes, I don't necessarily know whether that's the case, and I think that could be, I guess, enough of ammunition for Ferrari to lure him maybe into their team. So I think Valtteri Bottas could be a very interesting player in the driver market if Ferrari is able to maybe convince him to jump ship and join them. Now, there were a couple of other less likely drivers that they also thought about. The first being Antonio Giovinazzi. So obviously he's Italian, and he's also the Ferrari, let's say, junior reserve driver in a sense. So a couple of potential reasons to maybe promote him into the second Ferrari seat. However, his first season at Alfa Romeo wasn't that impressive. So I think the team would probably make a big mistake if they wanted to put him in that car, because I think he'll probably cost them points and he'll be a bit of a liability when you measure him in the driver championship against the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull, who are probably going to be Ferrari's main competitors next year. The other name that popped up is Sergio Perez. Now, he is an interesting one to me just because I think he's a very, very capable driver. He had one opportunity at a top team with McLaren in 2013, and obviously there were lots of mitigating circumstances to what happened that season. But Perez did have a difficult time at McLaren at that point, and I know he was very young, and he has proven himself to be an excellent race car driver in the subsequent years at Force India and Racing Point. So he might be quite a solid second driver to have in the team. He's not the strongest qualifier, so he might, he won't come to blow come to blows with Leclerc in that sense. And he's obviously an excellent executioner of races as well, so he could be a very strong supporting act to someone like Charles Leclerc. But at the flip side, I am actually not sure how keen Perez would be to join Ferrari, given that he now has a 3-year contract with Racing Point. That's going to become a works team next year as Aston Martin, and with the big amount of investment being pushed into that team, new facilities, very lofty goals, Perez might actually want to stay and build up that Aston Martin team to be a very, very strong race team in future. So I think Ferrari is going to have to make a very convincing argument to Perez, given Perez is standing in Racing Point and then Aston Martin next year as the lead driver and the main point scoring driver of that team, for him to come to Ferrari and then play the supporting act to someone like Leclerc. So we've discussed the potential replacements for Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari. Then I guess we also need to think about where Vettel could potentially go next year. So the most obvious choice, I think, would probably be McLaren, in the case that Ferrari decides to sign either Carlos Sainz or Daniel Ricciardo, where if Sainz goes to Ferrari, then it's just a straight swap, with Vettel going to McLaren and essentially taking Carlos' seats. Alternatively, if Ricciardo signs for Ferrari, then Vettel might consider going to somebody like Renault, although I don't think, if you look at the trajectories between McLaren and Renault, I think Vettel would be less likely to go to a team like Renault than a team like McLaren, but that's just my opinion, I guess. In terms of top teams, obviously there are two others, so Red Bull Racing or Mercedes. a lot of people have been saying, why don't Mercedes sign Vettel and put him up against Hamilton? Again, it sounds very evocative. It sounds like something we'd all like to see. In practice, would it happen? Probably not. I think I've already mentioned what a good job Bottas has been doing as a supporting driver. The harmony within the Mercedes team is as good as it's ever been. So I really don't see them upsetting the apple cart by signing another world champion to just go and grate Lewis Hamilton's gears. Red Bull Racing, I think, if this happened last year, I think Red Bull Racing would have signed Vettel to partner Max Verstappen. But I think they are in a much better position in terms of stability. I think they are happy with, Albon's performance up to now. Verstappen is also signed for 4 more years. They have security and stability and a star in Max Verstappen. So similar to Mercedes, why would Red Bull upset everything that they've built by signing Sebastian Vettel for 1 or 2 more years and potentially cause a whole lot of distress in the team that could have been avoided with a less confrontational teammate? So I think I'm going to join the majority camp here and say that I would expect Vettel to probably retire at the end of the year, given that he doesn't seem like the type of character to really stick around in F1 just for the sake of sticking around. If he doesn't have a drive or a team that he really loves or really believes in, he's not going to just drive around just for the sake of it. So I don't really foresee him being at a top team next year. So he either has to really believe that McLaren or another team could provide the goods, or he's probably going to say, he's a 4-time world champion. He's won, more races than almost anybody else in history. So he's going to call it a day and go live in Switzerland with his cows and with his children and with his lovely wife and live out his days there and, think back to the good old days with Christian Horner. So I think that's probably the route that he's going to take. Happy to disagree. If you guys disagree with me, please go and comment on my various channels. Happy to fight with you about what Vettel could potentially do. Very much open to suggestions as well. And I guess I'm still recovering slightly from the announcement today because I really, really did not expect it given all the noises the two parties were making before. So let's keep our ears on the ground for the next announcement, since I think we'll see quite a few cards tumbling into place as soon as the second Ferrari seat is announced. So I think we need to look out for that. So that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you find my voice alluring or my facts fascinating, please give the podcast a subscribe or follow me on Twitter, where my handle is @TF1Show, or on Instagram, where my handle is @TheTF1Show. So I'll hopefully be back very soon. Bye.